into Bootcamp session 4. In this session, I'm Natalia Naprienko, product owner in Tridion sites, and with my colleagues Nick Hill and Mihai Papasima, we are going to talk about what's new in Experience Space in Tridion Sites 10. And the first topic I would like to talk, it's basically user interface security. So what have we changed here? Basically, we improved experience. We significantly improved the security in Experience Space. So we introduced a backend for front-end API. So it's basically API that locates in between, of course, on top of core service REST and before the Experience Space user interface. With this, we moved all the access token management logic into this backend for front-end API. Instead, backend for front-end creates a security sessions and only provides security session ID to Experience Space. So this session is stored in a cookie. Backend for front-end API provides a number of security improvements. First of all, no secure or sensitive data exposed into user interface anymore. Before that would be stored in the browser. Now it's completely safe, so it's handled on BFF and not exposed to browser. Yeah, it's also applicable for requests for images and binaries, and it also basically, because we only send in the cookie or session ID, so there is less data to transmit from front end to backend on each request. Yeah, that's a security improvement, which basically requires access management now. Going to the next topic, another feature or improvements that we made into Experience Space, it's basically text suggestions related to text suggestions. So with Sites 10, you can now use suggest text on organizational items metadata. For example, if you have a page with some metadata fields, you can classify this page using the suggest text functionality. Or if you have a folder or structure group, that's also possible to classify it with text suggestions. Let me show you how that works. Okay, so I will just probably start first with page. So I do have a page here, right? And I have, let me just start editing it. I have some metadata fields. So I do have a text field with some description, and I do have a text field. So basically the field where I would like to classify my page with the text. So basically for page, you would get this button that you can click, and it will return you suggested text. Yeah, these texts are returned based on text fields, any other text fields that you have in the metadata. For example, here I do have official cocktails, and depends on this text, it returns you text suggestions. Of course, you can agree or disagree, right? You can review them and maybe add more. And just finish the page editing. Let me show you one more example. For example, if you want to classify structure group. Yeah, I have similar example here. I do have metadata fields with one text field, and here's a field for a text. Yeah, here you would get the button at the right. So you can just click suggest text, and yeah, it returns you text suggestions back. You also have some notification right on the top that there is some changes, and also the field is marked with suggestions updated. Yeah, then you can save, publish, and maybe use it at your website for navigation or for content recommendations. Yeah, I did show you a couple cases. It's also, but you can also now use text suggestions for folders or bundles. Yeah, basically any organizational items where you can assign metadata schema, metadata fields. That was my part. For next presentation, I would like to hand over to Nick.
Thanks, Natalia. So yeah, I'm Nick Hill, one of the developers on the Tridion Sites UI team. Let me see if I can take control. It's not yet. Maybe I'll try sharing instead. Okay. Right. So hopefully you can see this is the well, one of the new features in yeah, the Sites 10. So we've introduced an activities view. Yeah, previously there was some possibility to finish or start workflow on items via the editor, but there was no dedicated view of all the activities and no place to see your activities in Experience Space. So we've introduced yeah, a dedicated activities view. I'll quickly run over some of the features and differences between yeah, the views in the Experience Space versus the classic UI. So the first well, big difference I think is that whereas in the classic UI there are actually 3 different places where you can more or less see the same information. So non-admin users or users without say workflow management, they can they have a dedicated view. This one here, a simplified view, where they have like separate lists for assigned versus items in progress versus finished activities. And there's also this things to do list, which is accessible via yeah, a button in the toolbar, which shows similar information. For yeah, admin users and users with workflow management rights, they also have this dedicated admin view where they can see activities from all users. But yeah, so it's yeah, depending on the role you have, you go to a different place potentially to see your activities. And in some of the research we did with customers, they weren't even aware of all of these different possibilities. They used one, and that was the only one they were familiar with. So yeah, in Experience Space, we've decided to yeah, just have a single view. If you're an editor, so if you don't have workflow management rights, you'll just see your own activities in that view. Admins and workflow managers, they by default they'll see everything, so also activities related to other users. If they want, they can just focus on their own activities, and the best way to do that is via there's a configurator, a request configurator option, which Mihai will talk about later, which will just load the activities that yeah, are relevant to you. Another change, or some small changes related to terminology. So in the classic UI, we have this concept of task name, and which really is the process, and it's by default, I think, concatenation of the process definition title and the item. So for single item workflow would be the component name, for example, or the page name. For bundle workflow is the name of the bundle. So we still have task name, but we call it process, and it's I think not shown by default. It's a configurable option, but it's not shown out of the box. We've introduced separate columns for the process definition name and for the item that's associated with the workflow. We call it the primary item column because for bundle workflow, for example, or if you can associate multiple yeah, multiple items with an activity. So yeah, the primary item is the one that will be shown in the column. We've also introduced distinctive colors for this to represent the status of the activities, so to make it easier for customers to quickly view, or group items based on their status. Similar to like the design in the Explorer, we have this Insights panel. And so the Insights panel provides information relevant to the selected activity. We have 3 panels in the case of this view. So an information panel, which more or less lists the information that you can also see in the individual cells. Related items panel, which for say an item in bundle workflow would be all the items that are in workflow in that bundle. So you can get a quick overview of the items there. Similarly, if you have items in multi-item workflow, you could see the items in that in that workflow. And we have a process history panel. So if you select an item and click on that tab, you'll see the previous activities in that process instance that were completed already. So you'll see the current activity plus the completed ones. There you could, for example, view any comments on previous activities, or maybe that would be useful in completing your task, for example. We have 4 out of box 4 actions that are supported on workflow activities, so we can start them, finish them, assign them, or if an item's in failed state, we can attempt to restart it. And all of those can be performed on multiple activities at the same time. So there's batch support for all of those. In the classic UI, there's batch support also in the admin view, but the other views only support operation on a single item. So for editorial users, being able to support batch operations would be an advantage in experience space. This will be discussed much more tomorrow in tomorrow's presentation. But as with main Explorer view, there's also extensibility support in the activities view. In particular, you can add new action buttons or context menu options. So here's just some simple examples of buttons which aren't provided in the standard view. You can also add custom columns, and if you happen to be a customer that doesn't use workflow, and because the activities tab is kind of quite prominent in the top navigation bar, you could remove that tab. So you could remove it if it's not relevant to your organization or particular users, for example. And the final thing to highlight is we have a less obtrusive indicator if you have new activities. We had some feedback on the classic UI that particularly if you're an admin and you're finishing multiple activities, you get spammed with notifications in the top right corner. So now we still show it as a new activity, but it's it just shows the number, so it's more subtle. When you then switch to this view, that will be cleared. So basically once you've had the opportunity to see the new activities, we reset that counter. Okay, so I'll demo those in a moment, but first I want to talk about one of the small feature that's new to Experience Space. So in 9.6, there's a lot of work done on the content manager with caching of data, because now that we return contentless items, so we return a lot more data with items in the list. Caching was introduced to reduce the impact on the database and make the response more quicker. And I think that was improved as well in some improvements to that also in size 10. And so in Experience Space, we take advantage of that. So the classic UI and 9.5, 9.6 Experience Space they're based on there's like a single store of item data on the client. So if the user modifies an item, if they change its state or edit the content or something, then we need to update the item in that store. Similarly, if we request data and it turns out that one of the items in a database has been modified, we try to update it based on the newly loaded data. But that's quite a complicated thing to try and manage in the client, and particularly because, for example, something about the data can change even if the item itself, like its state hasn't changed. So if the parent folder name changed, then that would affect the data for the item, but it's not going to change the item modification date. So it's hard to know when things should be updated. So over time, things tend to get desynchronized, and maybe some item no longer exists. Its name has changed. It's not in the right state to perform a particular action, even though it has that action in the toolbar, for example. So what we've done in Tridion Sites 10, or what we've started in the UI in the Sites 10 release, is to migrate from this central store approach, which is based on React Redux, to an approach where each component is responsible for its own data. So, for example, the tree and the table, the panels, each responsible for their own data using a React query approach. And while it's possible to have separate caches for each of those different components, we've gone with an approach where we request data each time. Each time a user navigates through the view, for example, then we request new data. So that the idea is that the UI is always up to date. If the users make changes, we will get those changes the next time we go to a folder, even if it was previously loaded. If we ourselves make a change, for example, if we change the state of a parent item, the shared items will inherit that state when we drill down to them. Right, so the most visible indication of that is this, we have this background loading indicator. So in this case, we've gone to this folder, the data's previously been loaded, so we can show it more or less straight away. But we're also making a background request for that data, and any differences will be seamlessly injected. And we see that by this sort of loading indicator here. So let me go to the demonstration. Okay, so this is the view, so we can switch between content and activities. This is the primary item column. So as we see now, so for single item workflow, we just show the individual item. So it could be a component, could be a page. For bundle workflow, we show the bundle. So if I click on one of these items, it will take me to that component in the Explorer. Let's click on this one. Okay, so we've ended up here. So that's all right. So what I want to do now is to create a new item. So creating an item in here is going to put it into a workflow automatically, so that they require bundle approval. So let's create one here. Right, so we still have the option to finish the activity. So that's something we had previously, but now we have this workflow activities view as well, and we can see that straight away. So we can see there's a new activity, just the one that we've just triggered by creating this component. So we can switch here. Right, so we have this new activity here. If we select it, all right, so we can now have a look through the panels. So this is the information panel, largely duplicating information we see in the columns. Related items, since it's single item workflow, we only have one item here. If we were to look at the bundle workflow example, for instance, so click here. So we can see this one has a page, two components, and the bundle itself. We can also look at the process history list. So this case is just a single step in that workflow. Let's see if we have anything. Okay, so here we've done the perform task and we're on the review task, right? So we can see now the history, expand it to see, if the user left a comment, we would see it here. All right, so I can go back to this one. For instance, now we can finish the activity from here. We can leave a comment. All right, so it's waiting. We need to reload because the workflow here is quite slow. Okay, very slow. Yeah, assigned. Okay, done now. So this one is now on the review task. Okay, if we expand. Okay, so we see our comment here done. So now I want to create one more activity, and then we'll finish them together and demonstrate the batch actions. So Bootcamp 2. Right, so let's try and finish both those together. So we see that we have one review task, one perform task. When we try and finish those, the perform task doesn't require any user feedback. We can give a comment, but it's optional. So I'm able to finish this one straight away. If we had other non-decision activities in the same batch, they would also be grouped together in this step. So pressing finish and next would finish all non-decision activities. We do that. And then decision activities based on the same process instance, they can be finished in the subsequent step. So here we have the option to accept or decline. We can accept in this case, and I only have one in this batch, but so potentially it could be multiple activities here. So finish. That should hopefully succeed. Okay, so that's the workflow information I want to show to you. The other part is about the background loading. So if we go, all right, so let's navigate through these folders. So we see loading first time. All right, some of those have quite a number of activities. If we go back. Right, so we see, I don't know if you see it on the screen share, but there's like this background loading indicator here. What we can do is try and open this in the new tab. So we can make a change. Yeah, let's localize this one. Okay, so we see it changes to local copy. If we go back to this one and switch to that folder, see the background loading, and then we get local copy. So if a user on a different system makes a change, we'll get we'll get those changes the next time we navigate to that folder. Right, so I think that's all to demonstrate for those two features. So now I'd like to hand over to Mihai.
Hello. Let me share my screen. Is it working?
Yes.
Yep, notify upload.
Right. Hi, everyone. My name is Mihai Papasima, and I'm a QA engineer in the DXUI team working on Experience Base. I will be talking about the first multiple file upload. So, as it was previously mentioned, WebDAV is deprecated, and we need to provide a way for the users to upload multiple files, multiple multimedia files at the same time. For this matter, the upload multimedia file feature has been updated to allow multiple files. There's a queuing mechanism. So the way it works is it starts uploading up to 3 files at the same time. And if the user selects more than 3 items, the remaining items will be queued and the upload will pick them up as the others are finished. In addition, the upload is executed asynchronous, so other actions can be performed while waiting. The user can, for example, navigate to other locations or even use item actions while the upload is performing, so it won't cause any problems. And also, it will keep the name of the files if possible. Otherwise, it will add an incremental number at the end. There's also a batch report. When the upload completes for all the files, we can open the batch report to see the status for all the items. If there is anything wrong going on with any of the files, we can see there. Then we have configurable lists. Here we have added the column configurator. It is a menu which the user can use to enable or disable columns. And note that the available columns are different depending on the current container type. For example, publication list will have different available columns compared to a folder. So publication can have a publication type column, and that doesn't make sense to be in a folder, where the folder can have locked by or schema columns, which are not present in the publication. Then we have added additional columns where we exposed information which was already in the API response. For example, locale, URI, or organizational item. We have added new filtering. So we can choose which filters we want to enable or disable, and we can also filter on columns which are not currently visible because they might be disabled using the column configurator. And sorting. And all these features that I mentioned, they're also applicable to the activities view. Next topic, we have UX improvements. For this one, first is data request configurator in the items in progress. We have added the possibility for the user to configure the items in the items in progress call. They can choose to see items locked by other users or only by the current user. And also they can choose how many items the call can return. It's up to 2,000 items. And the data request configurator in the activities, the user can change the same thing. They can choose to have the response only items assigned to the current user or to other users as well. And they can also filter the response to have only specific steps. Note that this is what the data will return. It's not an actual filter. We do have a filter on the table. So if the data is available, we can filter on the states also on the table. And the last one is thumbnail view in Explorer. For this one, the table configurator will transform to this one, where we can choose between grid view and compact view whenever thumbnail view is selected. And this will make the user, the switch between basic grid view and compact view will make it easier for user to manage folders with more files, more multimedia files. Then I will switch to the demo. All right, so first for multiple file upload, in this location, in here, upload multimedia component, this now allows us to select multiple items, and it will use the default multimedia schema, or if there is a linked schema set on the current location, it will use that one instead. So we can select multiple items. The download will start, and we can see that there are 3 files being uploaded at the same time, and as they complete, additional ones start uploading. And while the upload is being done, we can navigate somewhere else, copy files, and this will not affect the current batch action. And then we can see that the upload has finished. And if we go to that file, that location, you can see all of our files. Next, for the configurable list, we have this. We closed it. Okay, so we have this menu here, which has all the available columns for the current container. And in this case, these are the columns which are enabled. We can disable some of them or enable new ones, which will be added at the end. And as I mentioned, the available columns are based on the current container. So for a folder, we have stuff like locked by. Can see if the current items are locked by someone, but in publications list, we have limited amount of columns, so that one isn't present there. Then for the filtering, previously the filters were on top of each column. Now the filters are available here. We can choose which filters we want to enable, and then in that filter we can apply it or not. And the data is based on the available data in the table. So for example, in here I can filter on the status, and it shows me these items. Maybe if I enter edit mode and go back, I can filter on the new one as well, the one in progress. We also have sorting, which is located here. It's also available for all the columns, almost all of them. And for example, I can sort on type or schema, for example, and the default one, none. It will be the order in which the API returns the items. And as I mentioned, all these features are also available in the activities. We have the column configurator. We can enable we can choose from a lot of available columns. Filtering and sorting is also available. Okay, and the next topic for the data request configurator. In items in progress, we have this menu. We can select between only showing items for assigned to the current user or items in progress by all users. Right now we have items enabled for all users. I can change it, and we can notice that the list is smaller. And we can also choose how many items in case we want to limit. Maybe there are too many items, and yeah, we want to deal with smaller batches at one time. And similar menu, which I mentioned, implemented in workflow activities. We can choose to see activities for all users, which is the current one enabled, or only for the current user. And the same thing, the list is smaller. In addition, we can filter based on the status. So we can see only failed items are returned. But we can, and by default, the completed one will be unchecked. And if we do have more, we can also filter, but this will filter on the data that we already received. So for example, can also filter it like this. And the last topic, thumbnail view in Explorer. Let me go to some images. So we can switch here between list view and grid view. And while grid view is enabled, the table configurator will be also will be the grid configurator. And then we can choose, by default, it will be the grid view, but we can also choose compact view. And when we're dealing with large amount of images, it is easier to manage them. Also note that filtering will still apply and sorting while in this view as well. And yeah, that is all that I have to show.